Today we're going to be looking at Splat in the color Midnight Ruby. So first thing you'll probably notice is the numbers on my swatches. They are 1 through 12, but I just want to say they are not synonymous with hair levels. They just help us keep track of each swatch throughout the video. Also, my swatches are not virgin hair, which means they've been chemically colored, treated, or bleached at some point in their existences. 1 is green, 2 is a cool tone gray, 3 is a deeper natural red, 4 is black, 4 to 11 is a range that goes to platinum blonde, and then 12 is like a toned version of number 11. So to start, I will take the color directly from the container and I will apply it to the very top of each swatch. Then some people do like to dilute their dyes, especially something like this that's very pigmented. So I will do a diluted version at the bottom of each swatch. Please keep in mind, everyone's hair is different, which means everyone's hair will take color differently. Plus, different screens and monitors can make colors look different, so please just use my video as a reference for how this could possibly turn out for you.
If I could show you, I'd hope that you could see all the possibilities. There could be a place for you and me. And under the stars, you pack up your car, 'cause you're going far away from here. I wish I could stall, but I never call, and you're going all the way this year. If I could tell you, I don't think you'd believe how long I felt this way. I'm begging you to stay, and if I could show you, I'd hope that you could see all the possibilities. There could be a place for you.
For the diluted section, we're going to do a 4:1 ratio. So that's going to be 1 part of the dye to 4 parts diluter. I know sometimes I get questions about what diluter is, so I just quickly want to clarify. It's essentially something that lightens the color of your semi-permanent dye. Some brands do make their own version of a diluter, which will have the same consistency. But since I do so many different brands and whatnot, I just use a plain white conditioner as my diluter.
Hope we feel the same. And if I could show you, I'd hope that you would see all the possibilities, and there's a place for you and me.
Alright, I'm gonna let these sit for about 2 hours. I will then rinse them out, and when they're dry, I'll meet you back here and we can do some comparisons. I just quickly want to remind everyone again that my swatches are not virgin hair. So virgin hair tends to be a little bit less porous, which generally means it can struggle to take or hold on to semi-permanent color. So even though this took on most of the swatches, if your hair is natural, there is a chance it won't turn out quite like my swatches. But I will say this is very, very pigmented, so if you were to try any dye over your hair, something like this would be more likely to have a result versus like a pastel, for example. So number 1 was originally green. It turned out quite orange. I wouldn't say it's a straight up orange, but compared to the lighter swatches, the undertone of this is way more warm. I think the green took out any of the truer red pigments. They kind of canceled each other. And it also darkened it a little bit as well. So it almost has a slightly more natural ginger vibe, even though it definitely isn't natural looking. It just looks more natural in comparison to like the platinum blonde swatch. The top half definitely looks more red than the bottom. It looks definitely much more orange on the diluted section. 2 was the gray, and it was a more cool tone leaning gray. So that actually played a role in this, where I can actually see a lot more cool undertones. So it's kind of funny having the green and the gray next to each other because they both took different parts of the undertone of this color. This also turned out a little bit darker than the blonde swatch, for example, and it made it a little bit more dusty, which also contributes to a slightly more natural look. But again, definitely not like actually natural. Same with number 1, it definitely looks more red on the top than it does on the diluted section. It starts to lean a little bit pink actually, even on the bottom half. I'm gonna group 3 in with 6 and 7. Even though the undertone originally was different, they have very similar outcomes. I would say 3 kind of actually falls right between 6 and 7. It's a little bit lighter than 6, a little bit darker than 7. With some colors, the warm undertone can play a pretty big role in how it takes the color, but in this circumstance, it didn't seem to matter as much. I don't want to sound like a broken record, but having this ruby color over darker hair that's natural because it's not super bright and saturated like the platinum blonde. Over the 3, 6, and 7, it also has a slightly more natural look without being like an actual natural red. And I'm not noticing a huge difference between the top and the bottom for number 3. The top obviously is just a little bit darker, but undertone wise it's pretty similar. 4 is the only swatch I would say I definitely don't see a difference on. 5 was our dark brown swatch. That one is hardly any different. I do see a very, very slight bit of a warmer undertone than before. So I imagine in the sun, it probably looks a little bit more reddish brown. And if we're talking natural, I would say that one probably turned out the most natural looking because it is so subtle. But I would say overall still looks brown. 6 is kind of in between, where it still looks sort of brown, but also sort of red. Going back to like number 3, that one definitely looks like a deeper red in comparison especially. And I will say, even though it took on the diluted section as well for number 6, if you are doing something like this over darker, especially natural hair, probably don't really need to dilute it unless you don't want it to maybe last as long or you're looking for a slightly quicker fade out. The outcome for 7 and 8 actually isn't too different either on the top half anyways. The diluted section for number 8 looks a tiny bit lighter than 7, which obviously makes sense since the swatch itself was lighter, but I'd say that the undertone is about the same between them. And then as the swatches get lighter until you hit number 11, the color turns out a little bit lighter and lighter each time as well. And you don't really have to have super light blonde hair for this color, I would say, unless you are looking for a super bright, vibrant red. But something like this does seem to have the pigmentation to cover a lot of different hair color. 12 was the tone swatch. Oftentimes I like to say that that sits sort of between the 11 platinum blonde and the 2 gray swatch. I'd say that's true in this case. It might lean closer to 11 because it's not as dusty and dark as the number 2, but it is a tiny bit darker than 11 and a tiny bit more cool tone. So toning your hair with this could give you a slightly more pinky red, whereas if you don't, it should be more of a true red. As for comparisons, so I obviously wanted to grab my most similar ones, but I wouldn't say I have any exact matches. So I want to start with Arctic Fox in the color Wrath. This is comparable to number 9, number 10, 11, and this is comparable to number 12. So you could probably imagine I was between Poison and Wrath for Arctic Fox, deciding which one would make more sense. And Poison, in comparison, just looked straight up orange. It is a very, very orangey red. So even though Wrath is more pink in undertone, it still looked closer to the true red than the Poison did. And you can probably see, especially on the diluted sections, the more pinky, cool undertone that Wrath has in comparison. The Midnight Ruby seems to be slightly bit darker as well. And just from how number 9 looks, I'm pretty sure the Midnight Ruby is definitely more pigmented, which I forgot to mention, but the Midnight line I'm pretty sure are more pigmented colors that are meant to go on natural hair if you don't want to bleach it. But again, as far as undertone goes, it's a pretty true red, maybe leaning a touch pink, but definitely not as pink as the Wrath from Arctic Fox. The other most similar comparison I have is Lunar Tides in the color True Lust. This is comparable to number 9, 10, 11, and this is comparable to number 12. I'm actually kind of glad I just said for the Arctic Fox comparison that the ruby might just be a touch more cool tone than a true red, because now comparing it to True Lust, at least in person, you might not be able to tell on camera because it's not always easy to pick up the minute differences, but True Lust I would say is definitely a true red. And next to each other, the ruby does look a tiny bit more pink, which could be good if your hair does tend to go more yellow if you wanted to bleach it and you don't really want a red that's too orange. Usually orangey red on top of a yellow hair is going to make it look even more orangey. So you could do a slightly more pinky red to kind of counteract any of the yellow in your hair. Otherwise though, I would say they're about the same depth, like a medium red. But again, just looking at number 9, you can tell that the ruby is a little bit more pigmented. But I mean, for the most part, they are pretty similar. Now, if you were curious about the other reds that I have in my collection, like I said, the Arctic Fox Poison was way more orange. So if you want a very orangey red, that one could be a good option for you. The next two that I had were kind of similar to each other. They were more orange in comparison as well, was the Good Day Young Rock Lobster and the Color Luxe Red. Compared to the ruby, definitely had a little bit more of an orange undertone. And then Punky Color Redalicious was more orange than the ruby as well, but not as orange as the Good Day Young and the Color Luxe. I don't know if I really have many pinky reds. I didn't notice any when I was going through that were about the same, like medium. I think, don't quote me on this, but I think Arctic Fox is the only pinky red that's sort of similar and obviously is more pink in undertone. And now I'd like to look at the before and after clips. Those, as well as anything past like this point in the video, will be done in natural lighting.
If I could tell you, I don't think you'd believe how long I felt this way. I'm begging you to stay. And if I could show you, I'd hope that you could see all the possibilities. There could be a place for you and me. And under the stars, you pack up your car, 'cause you're going far away from here. I wish I could stall, but I never call. And you're going all the way this year. If I could tell you, I don't think you'd believe how long I felt this way. I'm begging you to stay. And if I could show you, I'd hope that you could see all the possibilities. There could be a place for you and me. I feel 100 degrees when you call my name, and I don't know what you see. Hope we feel the same. I feel 100 degrees when you call my name, and I don't know what you see. Hope we feel the same. If I could show you, I'd hope that you would see all the possibilities. And there's a place for you and me.
I hope my video helped. If you have a request, I do have a link below to a Google form you can fill out. Just remember, I only do brands that do not test on animals. Thank you so very, very much to my patrons, and thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in my next video.